Hello, everybody. It's Heather with the Leadership with Heart podcast. And today I am super thrilled to have Anita Brickman on. She's someone who kind of came into my stratosphere. And I thought the work that she did was interesting. The mission that she was on is interesting in her organization. And when we talk about leading with heart and carrying leadership, I thought she fit right in with that bill. So welcome, Anita.
So great to be joining you, Heather, and to be connecting with your listeners.
So tell us where you are right now in your leadership journey.
So I am the CEO of the Plasma Protein Therapeutics Association. It is a mouthful. It's PPTA is how we typically refer to it. It is a healthcare association and it's global in nature. And this is my first global role. And this has been super exciting. This is a healthcare association that represents the plasma donation centers that are all across the US and in parts of Europe, and the manufacturers of plasma-derived therapies. So what does that mean? Basically, once the plasma is donated, it goes through a very complicated manufacturing process to pull out critical antibodies and proteins for rare disease patients, people with hemophilia, immune deficiencies, other genetic disorders. They need these regular infusions of these proteins or antibodies to lead normal lives. So we represent the plasma donation centers and the manufacturers of the medicines. We have an office here in the States and in Brussels. So it is global. We're small but mighty is how I like to say.
Oh, I love that. Well, this is the kind of association that we just need more of this in the world. Anything that's life-saving, life-giving, particularly when we think about what is happening in our world with so much violence and life-taking and those types of things. And so I think that and when you're in a kind of, I worked for Bonfils Blood Center for a while, which is now no longer kind of, they're all merged into a bigger organization. But I can think about that the mission that was there and the mission that you're on, that life-saving stuff really makes it easier to get out of bed, doesn't it? It makes it easier to say, like, you know what, I'm feeling tired, but at the same time, I'm doing great work.
Exactly. Yes, it keeps you motivated. It keeps you going. And you mentioned blood centers. People know a lot about donating blood, but not so much about donating plasma. And there are dedicated plasma donation centers. And to create these medicines I was talking about, it takes an awful lot of plasma. And of course, this is a finite resource. It takes humans willing to give their plasma to create these medicines. It can't be made in a lab. So just to be able to raise awareness of plasma donation, it's a huge gift to me, and to be able to share that message with your listeners.
Do you have any personal experience? I'm curious with this, but like somebody in your family, or how did you kind of stumble upon it to get to a place where you're the CEO of this association now? I'm curious.
Actually, it has been a journey through associations. And that's one of the unique aspects, I think, of Washington, D.C. and a few other cities in the United States where there are clusters of associations. These are nonprofits, but they also often have scientific, regulatory arms, lobbying, government affairs, both federal and state, and they represent industries. I've always focused on healthcare. So my journey through associations started with the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization. Of course, something that is a tough subject, but something we will all face at some point in our lives with our family members, with ourselves. And then I moved on to the Consumer Healthcare Products Association. So that is all things over the counter medicines, dietary supplements, consumer medical devices, anything that you purchase when you go to the drugstore.
Yes.
And that role was really focused on empowering self-care, right? How do we take care of ourselves and also be the most knowledgeable healthcare consumers we can be? And how to address health literacy, health accessibility, gaps, disparities, really an exciting role in consumer empowerment. What I think is really neat about PPTA is the close connection to the patient community. And let me say that again. Excuse me. What I think is really unique about PPTA is the close connection to the patient community, meeting individuals who have this extra burden in their lives of being diagnosed with this rare disease, often feeling very alone until they join a patient community. They are some of our strongest voices. Anytime we go on Capitol Hill to talk about the importance of donating plasma and plasma-derived therapies, we have patients with us. So it has been a unique journey for me through healthcare associations, but I feel like this is a very special place because I get to be connected to these patients who benefit from the work we do every day.
I love it. Yeah, any of that good mission-driven work that's caring
Yep.
and helping people. Healthcare tends to be an industry that comes to me the most, wanting to align, because I'm always talking about caring leadership and listening, and those are such important things to be doing as we think about patient care and what their needs are. So, I can appreciate the work that you do. So I am curious to know, like, how big is this? How big are the teams that you have been like leading through these different associations? Are they smaller kind of teams, and how does that work for you? Like, how do people see you as a leader? Like, what are the words they use when they describe you as a leader in that regard?
Well, so let me just take a step back. I've always led small teams or not really been a leader at all. I actually started my career in broadcast journalism. I was a medical reporter and a news anchor for more than 20 years. And there I was the maybe de facto leader of a team of producers and a photographer who would go out with me to collect these stories, but I really wasn't their boss. And so when I transitioned out of journalism into healthcare communications, I really had to learn how to be an effective and empathetic leader at NHPCO, at the hospice organization.
Mhm.
And I even used an executive coach at that time to be like, how do I really inspire the best in people that are dependent on me for setting the strategic vision of where we're going? How do I get out of a mindset of being used to that daily rush and the daily satisfaction of a deadline? Every day in television news, you have a deadline. And when the newscast or when your story is over, you just take a deep breath and you feel very accomplished for a nanosecond. As you and I both know, Heather, leadership of teams, you don't get an immediate payoff. And sometimes it can be days, weeks, months, or it doesn't come. But I think the strongest leaders are those that can look far ahead and set the strategy, but be very present in the day to day. And that's what I try to do. I would say, I think I'm a very straightforward, I'm a passionate leader. I like hustle. I like transparency in people, and I like people to take risks. So I do try to have a very open door policy of come to me with all your ideas. And if something doesn't work out, let's figure out why it didn't and then move forward. But I do think my previous role as a journalist has made me a very good communicator and listener, because as a reporter, you must listen. But I think it also engenders resilience. And I think that is important for any leader in any space. But no, the teams that I have led are not huge. This is my biggest staff, and we're, I think, at like 33. So not up there with the Fortune 500, but we've got a great team, and I love every one of them.
Oh, that's awesome. When you're all on that road, on that mission to do great work, and it doesn't really matter the size, to be honest. We have a small mighty team. And my team's all women, and so it's kind of funny because we're just like we are all like very focused on getting stuff done and doing it with focus on the mission and being aligned and communicating. And so it's kind of cool to be. I think small is great. Small and mighty is amazing. So
I agree. And with a all woman team, then you probably have people who are very adept at multitasking.
yes, like I said, we do a lot. We do a lot together. I'm very proud of the work we do, and I do feel like the work we do is very mission focused, very mission centered as well. And so I think that kind of helps us when we're like, oh my gosh, there's one more thing to do. And I think that's the key. I just have always been drawn to that. I also feel that, to be honest, even in a for-profit Fortune 500, Fortune 100, whatever, doesn't even matter. You can always find a mission to focus on, right? There's always going to be something that's compelling that you can find that's compelling, even if it's not a nonprofit. I worked in nonprofit, but if you don't have to, in order to find that mission that's bigger and that really gets you out of bed. So, yeah, I think it's really, really, really crucial. So now, like these days, like who do you model your leadership by now? Like, do you read books? What do you do that kind of keeps you going? Like, let me keep sharp in this. Let me just make sure I'm continuing to lead this great team forward. Is there anything that you do from a leadership practice?
Absolutely. I really participate in the association leadership roundtables here in Washington, D.C., because they are my peers. And as a first time CEO, I know I have a lot to learn. So I really participate in the association community. I've always also aligned myself with women's organizations that will help foster leadership. And then I also look at some of the nonprofits, what I would call like the true charities, and some of those leaders. How have they been able to grow their reach? What have they been able to accomplish? How did they do that? And I think about leaders I've met through the American Heart Association, the National Kidney Foundation, Leukemia Lymphoma Society, Susan G. Komen. I look at those people, and oftentimes they have been women who have been really inspiring to me. That is where I draw a lot of guidance, inspiration, and a lot of fortitude from, frankly, is looking at some of those people who have been very successful in taking whatever their mission, looking at those people who are able to take whatever their mission is to the next level of impact.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So when I say to you leadership with heart, like what comes to mind? How would you define leadership with heart?
I think it really comes down to true empathy. They talk about the importance of, let me think about that for a second. Leadership with heart. Let me start that again. To me, there is nothing that is more important in leading with your heart than empathy. We never know what is happening inside a person. In this world where every time you go on social media, it's only the best and the brightest that you see of whatever people want to put forward about their lives. None of us know what the inner struggle of another individual may be on any given day. A leader, in my mind, who is leading with heart has to always keep that in mind. Not that we aren't always pushing the people that we're trying to lead to be their best and setting high expectations, but sometimes when those aren't met, I think empathetic leaders need to take a step back and think that there could be many other factors that are playing into that. So being an empathetic leader, I think, is offering grace at the appropriate time while still keeping the goals of the organization in mind. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Yeah. Yeah. It's actually interesting because I was talking to a group just yesterday. I'm a keynote speaker too. And so I was speaking to a group and oftentimes when people say, so when I talk about carrying leadership with the heart, they think it's like it's soft and that it's easy, or that it's soft and that you don't have hard. And I say, well, no, it feels good when it's done right. And it's also very hard. And it does have to have like clear expectations, accountability. You do have to set those expectations, be clear on the goals. You do have to provide guardrails and support people through it and hold them accountable, all the things that like balance out. But like what you're talking about, which is like the empathy, the compassion, and then saying, and here is our way forward. And here are like the 5 things we need to focus on. And how you do that is your way that you do that. So I'm not going to micromanage you. But we need to know like where we're going all together. So I appreciate what you're saying about that. I do think that there's a very, it's not even subtle. It's very clear that it's both.
It is both.
It's not just one or.
And I had someone give me a very great analogy about the difference between being nice and being kind. Now, if you're just being nice, you are trying not to ruffle feathers. You're not trying to upset anyone. You are trying to be a nice person. But as we know, in leadership, in business, whatever field we're in, there are days that just aren't nice. And you can be kind and still be honest in giving the feedback someone needs to hear, even if it's a course correction, even if it's a hard conversation. Leaders must have hard conversations. They can deliver them in a non-punitive and a welcoming way of, I want to hear what your thoughts are. Why did this project go so wrong? How do we fix it? How do we move forward? You can be kind and still deliver tough news. And in fact, I think it is unkind to not convey really critical feedback that could help that person course correct and maybe blossom even further in their career.
Yes, I always say that the whole the idea of like the most caring thing you can do is provide that feedback that helps them move forward. So it's a great point. One that I don't think we make enough, and we probably don't make enough on this show, so that people know on the other end, this is not just like this Pollyanna, like birds chirping, like "Oh, Snow White" kind of thing. Like sometimes
No,
you have to
it's not.
say, listen, person, I love you. And this thing has to change. Like
Yes.
you, you got to meet the goal we have here. I love you. And right. I appreciate all the things you do. And the value you bring is so amazing. And I think it's okay to do that. And here's what I always tell people, that we can go there when we've also done the hard work to build the trust up front. So when we've already put in like those positive dividends, we've already gone to bat for them, shown them that we cared about them, been there when it's been a tough time for them, really supported them. It's easier for us to go to them than in those times when we have to help them course correct. It's when we did not take the time, we did not put the effort in to show empathy or compassion up front with all the other things that happen in their life. And now they come to us and we see like, okay, something's broken here. We got to make sure we do some different shifting. When we go there, then we haven't built that trust, that rapport, that
Agreed.
them knowing that you're in the trenches, and it's just not the way to go. We were never going to be successful. People will definitely walk away feeling much more hurt than they will feeling like almost like they let you down because they know you believe in them so much. And so
I
they want to
think
get
that is
better.
perfectly put, Heather. It is that it's the emotional bank that we build with people. And I do think as leaders, we don't want to be off-putting or remote, because to me that just doesn't work. And then when you are delivering, to your point, difficult news, and it might not even rest on the shoulders of that individual, it may be organizationally we have to fix some things. If you haven't made that investment into your emotional bank with this individual, yes, you are much more likely to be discouraging and to leave that person deflated. And none of us want that, right? None of us. We want to lift people up. But sometimes as an organization, things happen, or there are factors coming our way that we need to prepare for and shift our focus and improve our skill set. And you can't do that if you don't have the honest information.
So it's so very true. Okay, so now we come to the point of the podcast where you're going to share a story, and this is like, let's just here's what we're going to do now. We're going to take off our, because we're both obviously really good communicators, but we're going to take off of our like we're a professional communicator hat, and now it's like literally like sharing with the people a story, a specific time when maybe we did not show up with such leadership at heart. We did not show up with such care and concern. Maybe there was a time you're like, oh, I'll never forget that. Wasn't my greatest moment. What did it look like specifically? And then what did you do to come out of it? Because it's in the what we came out of it part, how we did that is where everybody on the other end gets to learn, right?
Mhm.
So I'd love for you to share that specific story with the listeners now.
I think it would probably be during my first year at NHPCO. I can't over emphasize the difference between a newsroom environment and just a typical office. The continual charge of energy that is in news, broadcast, print, whatever, but the constant pressure that is always there. And as I said, that payoff, that deadline, it's always a daily sprint. And I think when I first made the transition to having to look at goals that are several weeks, months out, and helping motivate people to achieve those, it was a major mind shift. And I don't think I felt restless. I felt out of sorts. I wasn't sure if I had made the right decision. I'm like, can I do this and create a communication strategy for this team when I'm used to the frenetic of the now of the newsroom? Certainly, I had some longer term projects or topics that I researched extensively. But when you are setting a course for an organization, there are so many things you have to take into account. You do have to be agile, but you do have to still stay true to that overall strategy. And I felt that that first year, I probably stumbled a bit also in my expectations of what day to day would be like and what individuals would be bringing to me. And that is what, as I said, I did work with an executive coach to say, how do I shift my thinking toward the longer term and settle into this new rhythm of work So I think when you are going through some of that internal conflict, you're probably not the best leader. I think I was always empathetic and a good listener, but in that first transition, I probably didn't set those guideposts or those milestones as clearly as I could because I was truly still trying to figure them out myself. And we were also facing at that time, soon after I joined the organization, an in depth investigative series by a very top tier newspaper into the hospice industry. And it was really tough. And this was a year-long type thing with an expose coming out every few months. And getting prepared for that and knowing if it came out clearly, in the Sunday paper, we were going to be there on Sunday figuring out how to respond to that. And I think I had such a 24/7 mentality from the newsroom. I probably had some unrealistic expectations of people in how they dealt with that and that long-term stress, especially not knowing when it was going to come, continuing to try to engage with the journalists, the editors of this paper, and trying to make sure we were doing everything we could to share what we felt was the true picture of the hospice community and the hospice industry. So it was tough. It was a tough year, but I'm so glad I made that transition because it set me on this journey where I was able to share the stories of people who were getting excellent end of life care. I was able then to move into an organization where I was talking about self care for moms and their kids, all ages of people, and running an educational foundation on medicine safety, really true to my roots as a medical journalist. And all of that helped prepare me for where I am today in this seat, here at PPT. I feel so humble and so blessed to be here. But I think that first year was really pivotal to change my work style, my mindset, and, what I received positive feedback from without the daily rush of adrenaline.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, we all evolve. We have to, or we die. Right?
Yes,
That's
that's
kind of the
right.
gist of it, right? So you had to decide to be different. You were in an uncomfortable position. Interestingly enough, where the industry was and what was happening at the time, you were the perfect person to be in that leadership role, given the communication background. So, like, all of that stuff worked out well. But you're right. Like, at the same time, then having to support this internal team and support all these other dynamics, and I can imagine how hard that transition was. But um, again, the self-awareness I think that it takes to say, it's time to evolve. I got to be a different person. I've got to show up differently for people that are here that look
That's
to me for
right.
guidance daily. And I got to bring all my strengths to the table, and I got to be willing to stretch and grow. And that's, what you did. And I think that's, for those who are listening, is like, we all are at that, we get to those crossroads here. There's always those, like, those mileposts that were there, and we have to say, who am I going to be today? And not be so comfortable with what we were before.
I think that is so true. When you're working in television news, clearly you're at that time, I felt very strongly about my tenets as a journalist and being very nonpartisan. In some cases, I see different things today, but we're not going there on this podcast. But I think also when you are still, even in whatever local market you're working in, you are trying to be, yes, a journalist, but also a news or TV personality. So a lot of your job is really wanting to be liked by viewers,
Mm,
having them invite you into their home. When you're leading an organization, that is not your primary goal, is to be liked. And sometimes you're going to have to make decisions where people are not liking you at all. So it is a very different, it
mhm,
certainly was a movement for me away from a more people pleasing mentality toward a more grounded, focused leadership style that I
mm,
needed to evolve into. But to your point, Heather, this can be an evolution for any leader along the
yeah.
way. But I think anytime we have some adversity, it is an opportunity for growth. And
Mhm,
that is how we evolve into better leaders, just better people in general.
mhm. And I do think we're called to the moment we're supposed to be into. I'm a true believer in that. Even when it's painful or when you're wondering, should this be me or is this me? When you're after you come out of it, you're like, okay, that was supposed to be me. Okay, I get it. But it was so
I get
painful
it.
as you're in
Yeah.
it. Okay, so now we reached that time of the show where you get to ask me anything. Do you have any questions related to the work I do? I mean, obviously employee engagement, retention, and leadership, and listening, and belonging, and all these things. And so, do you have any questions for me that you'd like to ask?
Well, Heather, I have listened to some of your podcasts and they are fantastic. What is a key theme or an attribute in all the people that you've interviewed? What makes for really a strong leader and a resilient one? I think about what leaders had, and well, we all had to get through COVID, but people leading organizations through such uncertainty and keeping some semblance of togetherness and morale through this really difficult time. What have you seen as kind of one of those key traits in the best leaders that you've interviewed or in yourself?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And I think the main thing, kind of what I start off with a lot of things, and it's self-leadership. So it's which is inside of self-leadership is there's so many things wrapped up in there, but it's like they have already a cadence for centering themselves. They have a cadence for kind of filtering through the stresses that happen and figuring out how to refocus the very next day. So they use like resilience building, adversity bounding types of strategies to keep them centered and grounded in just like who they are and how they're showing up and how they should be showing up for those around them. They have a certain amount of obviously emotional or social intelligence to be like aware of what's happening in the environment, but it really is saying, how do I center myself from an emotional self-management perspective so I can show up for those who need me today? Because I can't worry about tomorrow in that type of crazy scenario, particularly in healthcare. Just even much more bearing down on people in healthcare during the pandemic than any other time or any other industry. And so it had to be like today, what do I do to kind of work through my own emotions? What do I do today to make sure I can respond with my best self? I think that's the number one attribute. I mean, by the way, it was the number one attribute then, and it still is the number one attribute today. Right? Because if we don't have an awareness of us, how we're feeling, we don't have awareness of those around us, we aren't choosing to respond in kind based upon what we pick up, and we don't have that emotional control over how we want to respond to something that's in front of us, particularly like you were saying too, and alluding to earlier, the political climate, and particularly in association work and all the lobbying and all the things you have to do, right? There is a level of I have to stay grounded and I cannot
Yes.
become emotional, right? And so I think that is such an important attribute. I don't even think we cannot overstate that one enough. That has to be a centering thing we have to do. So I think that cadence of that is going to be important, I think, for all leaders, irrespective of what industry they're in.
And
Sure.
what do you advise to help people get more grounded? I mean, there's a lot of talk now about whether it's using meditation or different things to stay centered, and that has definitely become more common. It's out there in the
Yeah.
lexicon or about self-care.
Yep.
What do you advise people to do so that the stresses don't start to tick up and up and up and up until you feel like you might crack?
I think there's a couple things. One is I think like you did early on in that leadership journey, getting a coach. Coaches is extremely important. They help you decide they help you with practices and they help you figure out what are the things that are most important and what are the things you can let behind, how you can focus on control. And I also think therapy is another extremely good for people who, maybe are, oh, it's very taboo, but it's extremely important to say, if I'm caring for me, it's all of me, it's in and out, it's all the things. And so therapy, any kind of counseling, any of that kind of thing, I think would be really important to do. But I do think this is not a cookie cutter approach. I just don't believe in cookie cutter. So I think like, some people absolutely find complete peace gardening. Some people find complete peace running 10 miles a day. Some people like the meditating. Some people like prayer. Like it's different for everyone. And I think the reason why I like the coach aspect is they can help you say, like, for example, journaling is a really good exercise that I would teach with folks that I'd coach. And understanding the times when you feel the most stress, the times when you feel the most relaxed, the times when you feel like you have the most clarity, what is happening at that time. And as you start to kind of do this over 2, 3, 4 weeks, you're like, huh, every time that happened, I was doing X, Y, or Z. And when you figure out what those variables are, you do more of that or less of that, depending on what it produced inside of you.
That is
So
such a great actionable tip. I'm going to try this too. I'm going to just take some notes in my journal because I've gotten away from that. And now you've inspired me to get back to it. I think I need to dust it off.
Yeah, journaling it. I had one person who was like, I love journaling so much now that I've been doing this with you. Then now, like whenever I go on vacation, like if I can't find, like I'm gonna pull whatever I can out. I'm gonna be writing something down that day. It just helps to center you. So whatever you do, just try to center yourself. And I personally, like every time I get up in the morning for, there's a prayer and then I go straight to the gym. I come back and we all have a certain cadence, right? And I think that's the key is what are the 3, 4, 1, 2 things you do in the morning, in the middle of the day, at night, just says, okay, what happened?
That exhale.
Who was I? How did people feel around me? Like those kinds of evaluations. It says, okay, well, then I can make a different choice tomorrow. Totally different choice.
Great
tomorrow.
advice.
So now that we're kind of at the end of the episode, what might be a couple pearls of wisdom you'd leave people with as we think about the leadership journey that maybe anybody can be on right now, where they're at? Just a couple things that have been just really critical for you as you have kind of evolved and grown into your leadership. What might be a couple things you'd share with them today?
I think really staying true to your vision of what brought you to this role in the first place and not losing sight of that. And to your point, Heather, whether you're working in a corporate environment, a for-profit, nonprofit, every organization has a mission and values that I think that we can embrace. So staying true to those things and trying to embody them, I think really, and that consistency with it is really important. I think also being surrounded by excellent mentors, colleagues, support people, your friends, your family, your coworkers, but mentors as well, I think are really critical. And I have always found, you know, tremendous mentors at different parts of or different pieces of my career, and finding those people and being humble enough to say, I don't know the answer here and I need to seek it out somewhere else. And therefore, I am going to be a better leader because I can admit I don't know what I don't know and I need help getting there. And mentors can certainly help you do that. And, I still, at certain times, call my previous colleagues at CHPA that I learned so much from. And my previous CEO there so much supported me in taking on this role. And I am so grateful to him. And so, yes, he was my boss, but he was also a mentor and gave me books to read before I started this work. So to me, it really is seeking out those individuals. And something that, it's a cliche about not burning bridges, but really don't burn bridges, because some of my earlier references when I was making this transition were from years previously in news. And I try to always leave a place better than I found it. And I think if we all do that and have that mindset that nothing is forever, nothing's promised, here I'm going with all the cliches, but if we keep that in mind and just try to leave something that day or that person or that project better than when I found it, then that's enough, and that's really good. And if you can leave with people respecting you and feel like you respected them and you haven't burned that connection, I think that you never know when someone's going to come back around in your world or where you might come back into theirs. So I think leading with heart, I mean, I just love, the name of your podcast. Hopefully we can all do that, and can look back on a career where we've garnered respect and we've given it.
I love that so much. And as I think about the podcast, the concepts of caring leadership, being as you talked about, being the embodiment of the thing that you say you value is critical. And this not burning the bridge is so key. Yeah. Think about that for yourself as you're listening. What bridges have you burned? Which ones have you not? How many more can you go and kind of rebuild? Keeping that there, because it does pop up. It has popped up for me too. And in times where maybe I thought I may have semi-burned something, it wasn't burned. And so it ended up coming back and helping full circle. So as leaders with heart, And as though we are on this journey to be caring leaders in every day, trying to get better and better at it, just think about how much am I the embodiment? Am I the embodiment? Meditate on whatever it is you're saying to yourself. Am I the embodiment? What do I need to do to get there? And I think it makes our vision clear for the work we do every single day. So I appreciate you, Anita, bringing all this goodness, this heart, and in the work you do there, really at the association. It's very, very important work. We need it in the world, and so I appreciate you.
And I appreciate you, Heather. Thanks for having me on.
And thanks everybody listening for the Leadership with the Heart podcast. Be well.